Hey y'all, welcome to Open Chair Podcast. Pull up a seat. You're not too late. You are actually right on time. So let's get into it. About 2 weeks ago, after a meeting at work, a coworker of mine pulled me aside and asked if we could have a private conversation. So I don't know. That seems like a weird request because that doesn't happen often to me at work. So this coworker up here, not somebody who's a manager or anything like that over me, not a subordinate, but we're equals as far as work is concerned. He's somebody who I work with almost every day, and we work pretty closely with each other almost every day. So we closed the door. He looked at me and he said, in so many words, "Are you gay?" And for me, that's like an interesting question every time that I've gotten asked that. Because here's the thing, I'm not in the closet, I'm not DL, I don't hide it from anybody. So when it comes up, I'm honest about it. But I also don't wear it on my sleeve. And some of you might can relate to that. So this coworker, he had been quietly trying to figure it out for about a year and a half, is what he told me eventually. A year and a half trying to figure out whether or not I'm gay or not. So the thing that finally pushed him to ask me that, it turns out, was a video that I posted on Instagram and Facebook for my partner Sam's birthday. And in his words, that's what solidified it for him. People don't usually post a video like that of just a friend, is what he said. So today's conversation is about what it actually means to come out and the reality that for a lot of us, it doesn't stop at saying I'm gay one time and being done. It keeps happening. Every new room, every new chapter, every new coworker, maybe not every new coworker, but they're definitely going to be curious. And then on the other side of it, there's a whole other layer of coming out about what you actually want for your life. Even inside the gay community itself, we deal with that. So let's get into it. So this about a year and a half of fishing. I would go on vacation, for example, for a few days, and I would come back, and this particular coworker, he would ask me questions, the usual questions, where'd you go? How was it? That kind of thing. And then I noticed that he would give particular attention to who were you with? Did you go with a group or was it just you and someone else? He would fish to try to get a name of that person. And I just thought that was weird and I don't know. I just didn't feel like going into depth with that because again, I'm a private person. I don't really like when my coworkers are in my business as far as where I'm traveling or how I'm spending my money or where I'm spending a lot of my time. And that's my for general coworkers, like people who I actually consider to be friends who happen to also work with me is a completely different story. But he started probing because at least to what people have said about me, I don't give off a stereotypical gay. So people can't really place it. And typically they don't assume that I'm gay. They typically assume that I'm straight. They'll assume that I have a wife and kids. Even they'll assume that without ever even asking me that, or I guess paying attention to if I'm wearing a ring or anything like that. But yeah, he started slowly probing about just my personal life and who I was spending time with, where I was spending my time. But this Instagram and Facebook collage video was really what put put him over the edge apparently. So it wasn't me trying to be public about my relationship with Sam, but and it wasn't me trying to hide it either. It was me just showing a genuine love for my partner and celebrating him on his birthday. But to this coworker, that was the missing link. He's like, all right, I got him. There's no way that he'll be able to deny this one because who does that? People don't do that for their straight friends. Um, which may be true, but I've definitely seen gay people do that for their gay friends. You might be one of those people. So, but that was the missing piece. And then for him to ask me to have a private conversation in a room behind a closed door and me walking him through, because he asked eventually, like, oh, well, who was the person in the video? And I told him that's my partner, Sam. And then he started asking those questions. This is after I reveal that I am, in fact, gay. He just starts asking those questions about, how long we've been together, how did we meet? He asked some questions about my coming out story with my family, like, do they know about it? And I one thing that I forgot to mention, he also said when I said partner, he needed clarification on partner. Like, okay, what do you mean by that exactly? And I'm like, partner, like we're dating. So that was interesting because it was still kind of like, I guess, a little bit unbelievable to him. So, but it ended up being a sigh of relief for him. I could tell it was kind of like I knew it, and finally he had the proof there that said, like, okay, yeah, he's gay. My senses weren't leading me wrong. And he told me that him and his wife had been talking about it over a few months, and he would, bring some of our conversations to her and ask her what she thought, which I thought was kind of interesting that him and his wife were talking about his maybe gay coworker. But he said what also threw him off was the fact that I wasn't like, there's a what people would consider a very obviously gay person at our job, and he was like, well, you're nothing like him, so like, with him you can kind of tell that he's gay, but with you really can't tell. He's like, so that's why I wasn't sure. And he didn't want to ask me because he thought I may have been offended, which is, I mean, I don't know, every time that I hear people work through like how they process this whole gay thing about people being gay and your sexuality, like it's actually a thing for straight people. Apparently they really want to know, whereas I think on the flip side, we don't care too much about knowing if somebody's straight or not. So I don't know what's there to be said about that. But yeah, it's the fact that you don't fit this stereotype. It makes you have to reveal yourself if you want to, of course, but you kind of get pressured into having to reveal yourself if you're not somebody who's trying to hide who you are. So that's an interesting dynamic. And one of the things that he also mentioned was that, well, I didn't see you around a girl. You're an eligible bachelor, you got things going for you, and I would never hear you talk about going on a date with a girl or a date with anybody when usually that's something that will come up in conversation. I'm like, okay. But it is interesting that the absence of straight signals leads people to believe that you're gay. So you kind of have to perform heteronormative behaviors in order to not be considered gay. But I felt the need to drive home the point to him that I'm not in the closet, I'm not DL, I don't hide it, but I don't wear it on my sleeve either. And there's a term, and maybe you've heard this before, but it's called covering. And there's a book that was written about it back in 2002. But essentially, what covering means is like you're not trying to hide who you are, but you're controlling how visibly you express it. So maybe that's part of it, but for me, it's not necessarily that I'm trying to cover up my sexuality. I'm trying to cover up a little bit of everything again because I just don't like people really being in my business too much when I haven't invited them in and when I don't have that level of comfortability with them to have those kind of conversations, because I'm big on energy as well, and I do think that some people, you share with them what you got going on and they don't have the best intentions for you, or they start to hate on you because they realize that you're doing things that, I don't know, that they might want to do, or that they've thought about and haven't done, or that they can't afford to do but you're doing, or I don't know, it could be a number of different things, but that's just something that I choose to kind of keep to myself for the most part. So in that room, closed door, private conversation, whispered voices talking about me and my sexuality and who I'm dating. and just, I don't know, just kind of prying a little bit. But what's really striking about that moment, and after I left the room, I kind of started to think about it. The fact that it needed to be all of that. Like, no one gets pulled into a room behind a closed door with hushed voices to talk about being straight. They don't come whispering, looking around and, I don't want anybody here. Are you straight? That doesn't happen. That only happens to us. So yeah, that's something that kind of just rubbed me a little bit of the wrong way. The fact that we're still living in a world and a society where these kind of things still happen. So after that conversation, we both leave the room and we go our separate ways, and pretty much immediately after I'm out of sight from him, I pick up my phone and I call Sam, because if you have a partner, like, if you got any interesting information to share, especially something that y'all might have been gossiping about before, you're gonna share, which is probably what my coworker and his wife were doing about me. But I hopped on the phone as soon as I could and I called Sam and I told him, like, you won't believe what this coworker just asked. And it's all because of your fucking birthday video. And we had a laugh about it. But it was, for Sam and I, a culmination of at least a couple of months of me coming home and telling him, like, basically, this coworker, they tried it again. They're digging, they're trying to, like, figure it out, and they just can't figure it out, and we got a kick out of it. So when it finally came to a head, he's the first person I called about it. And that chapter's closed. It's out there. He knows. So another thing, because I kind of take it pretty seriously to be an example, because I know in the places where I work, it can be hyper masculine and people who are out of the ordinary, who are not technically mainstream, like those in the LGBTQ plus community, sometimes get marginalized. And then some of us, we get stereotyped. We get stereotyped for being straight, like me in my case. And I take it upon myself to be more out there and more forward, because I want people to realize that gay does not have to be the stereotype that you see in the movies and on TV. That we are full people with lives, with humanity, with families, with people that we love, that we're building lives with, that we're more than the sex, which people seem to want to focus on. We're more than just that. And subsequent conversations with this coworker, he shared with me that he feels some kind of way that I didn't tell him sooner. Like, he felt as though that we had a close enough relationship that I should have shared it with him a long time ago, apparently. And I always find that interesting, like how people will make it seem like you owe them something to reveal your sexuality to them. And they end up being the ones upset when you shouldn't even have to be in this situation to begin with. Like, it's crazy. I lost a pretty good friend of mine a few years ago for that very, very reason. He found out that I was gay, like, from someone else through the grapevine, apparently, and was pissed at me, and basically stopped being my friend, because he thought, again, that we had this strong bond with one another. He considered me his best friend, and he felt like, I guess, almost betrayed. Like, why didn't you share this with me? Why couldn't you share this with me? How dare you? Almost. And at that time, especially, I was like, I wasn't ready. I wasn't prepared to share with you in particular. And that's my right to share or not to share. It's my life. It's my journey. And just like your journey is your journey. I do think that everybody should be able to and should be working toward being more free and more authentic, but that comes in time. And not all the time is it always safe to do so either. So I'm not ignorant to that. But yeah, but people, they act like you owe it to them. And other than my mother, I can kind of understand maybe how, because she had a similar feeling when I came out to her. why didn't I say something sooner? And she was concerned, did other people know before she did? And if so, why? So I kind of get that maybe from a parent's lens, but anybody else, nah, I don't owe that to you. So if I tell you, I tell you. If I don't, I don't. You see me show up with whoever I show up with, then you know, and it shouldn't make a difference either way. It's not impacting my work, it's not impacting our relationship with one another. I'm still the same person before or after I utter the words I'm gay. So for me, this is not the first time that I've had to deal with this. I'm in law enforcement, and I remember early on, first getting on the police department, I had this coming out experience, and I was young and I wasn't completely out to begin with, but I credit meeting some phenomenal gay men who were also police officers who were living authentically, and they led by example, and they encouraged me to not necessarily encourage me, but they inspired me to be able to also live my truth. And I'll never forget that there was a time where a lot of departments were doing these It Gets Better series. And I want to say that it was focused on the LGBT community, like basically people who are gay or trans or whatever. They would record a video, basically share a brief synopsis of who they are and what they've overcome, and then you would end it with the tagline, "It gets better." Basically encouraging kids to not give up, that the circumstances that you're in now, you don't have to stay there, and you likely won't stay there, but just give it time and trust that it will get better. Someone had asked me to be a part of that video for my department. And I share that because that was the turning point of me coming out, I guess, at the police department. And I remember when that video was released, and I was so nervous to go back to my precinct because I was like, oh God, everybody's gonna see this video. They're gonna know that I'm gay, and what if they treat me differently? And I remember after the video was released, it was shared online, and I go back to work. No one said anything. I wasn't sure if anybody even had saw the video. And I remember that I remember just saying to myself, I was making such a big deal of this, and it seemed like no one gave a shit. So that was pretty interesting. But that was one of the first times in a professional setting that I came out publicly and in a very public way, being a social media posted on the department's website. So, but yeah, the police department, it's a hyper masculine type of environment. And of course, there's gay people on the police department, usually not flamboyant or feminine acting, presenting gay men, but they do exist. But you find yourself in this environment where even everybody feels like they have to prove that you're man enough to do this kind of work. So I think maybe that might be doubly true for somebody who's gay, when the perception of a gay man is that you're soft, you're a punk. You're going to let people, take advantage of you, and whatever the case may be. So another instance where it happened several times, as far as just coming out again and again, with family. And you may have experienced this too. You might still be experiencing this right now. But it started with my immediate family when I started to come out to them. And subsequently, aunts started to find out. And cousins started to find out. And, the extended family started, when they would ask, hey, are you married? Or are you, like, why don't you have kids yet? And why don't you have a wife? And things like that. And it gets to a point where you or somebody around you, in my case, it was my mother, started to tell people the truth. Jason's gay. And at that time, now that I look back on it, it's like, okay, but I could still be married. I could still have children, not to a woman, but those things are still possible for me. Whereas, back in the not so distant past, that used to be something that was exclusive or perceived to be exclusive to straight people, and gay people just remain roommates. You may remember that from not too long ago. But yeah, it would be a process of coming out in stages, so to speak, to your loved ones, to my loved ones. So yeah, I don't know. It was still continues to be an interesting experience, but definitely the family situation. It's a slow process that probably went over, I don't know, 10 years of coming out. I think everybody now who needs to know knows, because no one is trying to hook me up with one of their coworkers or their girlfriend's daughter or sister or whatever the case may be. That used to happen to me a lot. So that no longer happens. At least not with family, because they know. So I guess just to set the stage for this next part. So I was engaged for a few years, and when that engagement ended, was I started dating, and um, what I quickly learned is that in communicating what I wanted in my next relationship, I was very intentional about dating this go around. And I wrote down some of the qualities that I want. I got clear on what I wanted just in life. So, for example, I knew that I wanted to be in a monogamous relationship. I knew that eventually I wanted that monogamous relationship to lead to a marriage. I knew that I wanted to have, or I want to have, children. And those are things that I would screen for pretty early on when I was talking to somebody. If, that we were talking with the hope of getting to know one another. And if there was misalignment there, I would just keep it moving. So when I would have these conversations with guys, what I learned was I would ask them like, "Oh, do you want children?" And they would be very wishy-washy. They wouldn't want to give a solid answer as to whether or not if they wanted children or not, or about being married. They would say things like, "Well, I don't know. Maybe it would be nice." Or, I don't necessarily think that marriage is required or necessary. It's just a piece of paper and things like that. And I would receive that. And then I would tell them straight up, like, okay, well, that's in misalignment with what I want and what I'm actually looking for in a partner. And then a few of them, more than a few, they would come and they'd be like, well, no, I didn't really mean that. I just felt like I had to say that because you know how these guys are. Nobody wants to be settled down. Nobody wants to have children. They just want to deal with themselves and be selfish or whatever the case may be. And they would give me these excuses as to why they told me that they didn't want things that they actually do want. So for them, it seemed like another type of a coming out within our community saying, I don't want what the mainstream in our community is saying that I should have and what I should want. Which, by the way, just a shameless plug, which prompted me to start a Facebook group that was initially named Black Gay Men and Monogamy. Very on the nose. And thousands of people ended up joining the group from all over the country and all over the world. But I started that group because I needed proof that I wasn't the only guy out there looking for those kind of qualities. And I wanted to create a space where like-minded people can be amongst one another without the judgment that you're trying to subscribe to heterosexual norms. Like you're just trying to be like the straights, where it couldn't be that you're just looking for stability and consistency and wanting to build a legacy that expands or extends rather beyond you in your lifetime. So something to be said about I'm not in the closet. I'm not DL. I don't hide it from anybody, but I don't wear it on my sleeve either. So this position of not performing on either side of it, not performing the straight side of things or not performing the gay side of things, it leaves you in this space where gay people are accusing you of wanting to be straight or insinuating that you're holding back from who you actually want to be. And straight people think that you're trying to be selective or secretive. And it's not either of those. It's not either. So if that's the outer coming out, the constant work of being read accurately by the straight world, there's a whole other coming out that doesn't get talked about as much. It's the inner one. It's coming out about what you actually want for your life. And what's wild is it shows up as the same dynamic, just pointed at a different audience. So after the 7-year relationship ended, I went back to dating, as I mentioned briefly earlier. And again, a lot of men were leaning into the stereotype that they're open, I don't want kids, marriage isn't really for me. Like they were all sharing the same script on what you need to say if you want a man to have any interest in you. Like you have to essentially take any sense of responsibility off the table in order to land a man. And me personally, I just didn't believe that, and I didn't accept that to be. I knew for myself that, as I mentioned, I was relationship oriented. I wanted monogamy. I wanted marriage. I wanted kids eventually. So I started to say those things out loud, sometimes on the first date, sometimes in the first conversation, but definitely early on, I would get that out of the way and make sure that there was some alignment there. And if there wasn't, I would move on. I would communicate that and I would move on to the next one. And what I learned in doing that is one, I didn't waste a lot of time with people who would never potentially align with the things that I wanted. And we would be wasting both of our times really. And also if we decided to continue, it would build to resentment eventually when one of us were being forced to do something that we don't want to do or not being able to do something that we do want to do because of the partner that we chose. So I chose to just get that out of the way very early in my dating experiences. And honestly, I recommend that you do the same. Just weed out the people who don't align with what you want for yourself and for your life because you need people who are going to swim in the same direction. You know, if you have somebody swimming in the opposite direction and while they're swimming in the opposite direction, they got a hold of one of your legs as well, dragging you back, taking you away from your destiny and your dreams and your goals. That's counterproductive and it's a frankly a waste of your time and a waste of your life, especially when you can find someone who does align with you. And there's somebody out there for you and there's somebody out there for them and you both just should do each other a favor and let each other go and find those people. And not to say that some people can't change, but there are some fundamental things about what we want out of life that won't change, or what we don't want out of life that won't change. Like someone who doesn't want children, they're not going to automatically one day wake up and say that they do. And not to say that that can't happen, but it's very, very rare, and you shouldn't place a bet on that because it would be highly, highly unlikely. And again, you end up in a spot where you're resenting someone, which again would be a shame, especially if they were honest with you from the beginning, saying they didn't want this thing and you went along with it anyway, and then you get upset when they stick to not wanting to do the thing. So yeah, just think about that. A little bit of dating advice. So it turned out that the straight world has a closet for gay people, and the gay world has a closet of its own. A closet where wanting what would be considered a traditional life wasn't cool. It was basic. It was heteronormative. Like you weren't leading into your gayness or your queerness, that you were a sellout. So that's the closet that we have for gay people. And we shouldn't because there's room for all of us to be and we need each other. Like there's a place for everybody. Not everybody should be a biological parent. perhaps, maybe some people are better uncles or mentors or whatever the case may be. Not everybody needs to be married. You might know that about yourself, but you shouldn't discourage people from wanting that for themselves. You shouldn't be pushing people away from pursuing their own personal dreams that they have for themselves and for their future families. So there's seems to be two threads here. We have the thread of me having to reveal myself to my coworker by confirming for him that I was gay or that I am gay, still gay. And then also the other side where within our own community, I'm having to declare myself as a person who wants a more what would be considered a traditional life, coming out as that. And, feeling the why would you want that? That's kind of the vibe that I would get from some people. So the one thing about this second time around in my dating experience, when what landed me with Sam ultimately is it may have been our first conversation. We spoke for hours. We were on FaceTime. For in that conversation, we touched on a lot of things. I can't remember if it was that conversation or I think it was the next day that we connected. But it was pretty early on where we had these conversations about what we wanted and out of life. We spoke about the children thing. We spoke about the marriage thing, and it was interwoven into other conversation, but we did touch on it. And I thought, all right, to myself, check, check, check. Okay, now we can move on to other important things that you want to learn about somebody who you may decide to spend a life with. But I found that making sure that we were both on the same page out the gate, it made me more comfortable to lean into it, knowing that at least the foundation is there. Like there's still a lot to be learned, and learning will never end when you're in a relationship with somebody, romantic or platonic, because people change. But I knew the foundation was there, and that gave me more confidence to lean into it and to see what the possibilities were. Whereas again, in the past, I had dated people and not had those more serious, pointed conversations because I didn't think it was maybe that important, or I didn't want to run them off and scare them because people are afraid of commitment, or um, the thought of commitment. And when you're asking about marriage and kids, people think that you're trying to lock them down. So I would avoid those those questions. But more than once, I would be a few weeks into dating somebody, and one of those important topics would come up, and realize we're actually are completely misaligned in one way or another, and this ultimately will not stand the test of time if we were to continue. And again, this is a different story if you're just out there trying to have fun and have your fun. It can be a good time. But if you're trying to settle down, ask the important questions first. But first, actually figure out what it is that you actually want. Think about it. Be deliberate about it. Write it down. Put in your notes on your. It's still going to require for you to be flexible because not everybody has everything, but you should have your top 3 or 4 things that are non-negotiables, and you stick by that. And then with the person who meets those, then you lean into getting to know them more. And again, people grow and they learn how to love and how to treat certain people in their lives. So, some things can be taught, but there are some things that will not change. It's just up to you to figure out what those things are for yourself, and to identify again those deal breakers when dealing with other people. So I learned with Sam is that going first and sharing what you want, sharing your vision, sharing the things that you want out of life. It's almost a power move because it also gives the other person permission to do the same. And sometimes you have to lead the way with some of these things because the world is very uncertain and people are afraid and People want to be loved and liked and desired, and they will make themselves small. They will be quiet when maybe they should speak up in order to find that place in your life or someone's life, just to feel love. But if you lead by example, by being vulnerable, by being open, by being deliberate and sharing what it is that you want, what your vision is for your life, for your partnership, for a marriage, for children, whatever, you give other people permission to do the same. So I encourage you to just think about that a little bit more and to test it out and see how it goes and let me know. So yes, sometimes the cost of being honest is a smaller dating pool, but the people in that pool are actually viable options rather than swimming in a pool, a public pool with thousands of people who are not your kind of people. You can be more selective. You can do your screening early on. You can have a smaller pool, but it allows for you to save your time, save your effort, save your money because dating is expensive. And again, just be more deliberate in finding that person. It works. Like, trust me. You just gotta lean into it. You can't be afraid of it. Like, my situation is just one example of it actually working. Just weeding out people before you get too tied up, or even on your apps, your grinders and your jacks, or whatever it is that you're using, your Tinders and Hinge and things like that. Whatever you're using to meet people, like, be straight up, be honest about what you want. Don't be nonchalant about things that you're not actually nonchalant about. If it's a deal breaker, it's a deal breaker. Also, though, there's a balance here. You don't also want to come off as the person who's being overly selective and picky and bitchy, because some people are like that and they come off like that. But again, if you have two, three, four of things that you consider to be deal breakers or morally important to you, spiritually important to you, share, and people that resonates with, that'll allow for you to go on great dates and to have good conversation. And, even if it doesn't end up being the love of your life every time, that's okay because you get better at dating through repetition, but through deliberate repetition and spending time with people who more closely align to you than not. So I'm speaking to my millennial crowd, the 30s and 40 somethings. We getting old, y'all. But I'm speaking to y'all who we grew up in a time where being gay was still not something that was celebrated often. You still had to somewhat be in the closet, depending on where you live, especially, and the kind of family that you were raised in. That extended into our workplaces, into the places that you worship. Like, people, we grew up in a time where just being your true self just wasn't always a given. It wasn't always a given, but it is more so now than not. And I'm glad because that old world that's not so far in the past, it was exhausting. I don't know about you, but like, keeping up with the lies, keeping up with the omissions, not the straight out lies, but omitting, certain things to keep people off of your trail as far as like who you are authentically. It was exhausting. And I'm glad that those days are behind me personally. And hopefully they're behind you as well. And if it's not right now, I pray that it will be sooner rather than later so you can live the life that you deserve, really. But this episode is for those of us who you're out, you're not DL, you're not trying to hide from anybody, but you're also not wearing being gay on your sleeve. Like, people might not be able to clock it on you, and you're not necessarily waving the rainbow flag every day, although some days I do. But you might be the person who's getting asked those questions at work. Where's your wife? Do you not have kids? Or whatever the case may be. And you're having to come out over and over again, depending on the environment. So, but just know that I see you, I feel you, and I'm with you in creating a world where hopefully in our lifetimes, this will become a thing of the past as well. And that at the very least, that we leave the world better for the generation coming behind us, that they don't have to do all of this explaining and coming out all the time over and over again and having to explain your humanity, your authenticity, having to explain your love when other people don't have to do the same. This is also for the guy on the gay dating app right now. You might be watching this video and going between the apps, the hinges, the tinders, the grinders, the sniffies, the all the things, or maybe none of them. But for those of you who are on there and you're actually scared to be authentic. You're scared to be forward about what you actually want. You don't want to verbalize to the guy that you've been dating, what you really want out of life. And maybe you do or don't want marriage. Do they know that? Maybe you do or don't want children. Do they know? Maybe you want to live in a different city or a different country. These are all things that are worth having a conversation about. And it could be a moment of connection. It could be a moment of awareness. It'll certainly be a moment of awareness. And it'll be an opportunity to build a deeper connection. And honestly, like as human beings on this planet with one another, that's what we need more of. Real, authentic connection, platonically, romantically. So lean into that. So I challenge you to tell the next person that you're speaking to, the next person that you're considering going on a date with, tell them how you really feel. Tell them what you really want. Tell them what the vision of your life is. Like, where do you see yourself as it pertains to a relationship? And don't hold back when you do it this time. Don't be shy. If it turns them off, then fine. That's okay. You're not for everybody. And if you're in want a monogamous relationship, you won't be for everybody. But you have to weed through these people that you're not for to get to the one that you are for. And they're out there somewhere. If that's what you want, of course. But somebody has to go first. Somebody has to go first in being authentic and being forward and sharing what it is that they want. And again, as I mentioned before, that creates a space for the other person to do the same. And just remember, like, we're all still healing. We have a lot to unlearn and to unpack, and it's not going to happen overnight. And some people, they can't afford therapy. They maybe don't want to go to therapy, but it doesn't always have to be a professional that opens somebody's eyes and gives them a different perspective that changes their mind about something or about a way of being or about a way of approaching something. And you can be that catalyst for change. You can be that person who makes it different this time. Who makes it different this time for yourself and for them. And even if it doesn't work out, you'll take something with you from that interaction and they'll take something with them. And hopefully it'll multiply and the world will become, our world in particular will become a place where we are being more honest, more vulnerable in the right situations and with the right people, and that we're building the lives that we actually want, the lives that we actually deserve, and that we're not settling for what we think we can get. That we're not settling for the crumbs. Coming out doesn't stop at I'm gay. It keeps happening. Every new room, every new coworker, every new date, every new chapter. And underneath all that, there's the inner version of it. Coming out about what you actually want for your life, especially when the culture around you, even your own community, has decided that what you want is uncool or basic or not gay enough or too much like the straight worlds. The work is the same in both directions. Somebody has to go first. The default doesn't move on its own. You have to move it. And every time you go first, at work, on a date, at the dinner table, with yourself, you're not just saying who you are. You're giving somebody else the permission they were waiting for to say it too. If this conversation moves something in you, share the show with somebody who's still doing the math in private. If you want to work with, if you want to work, if you want to work some of this out one on one, you can find me at coachjwill.com. Life coaching, entrepreneurship coaching, early relationship coaching, with a heart for the LGBT community, our community. Or reach out at openchairpodcast1@gmail.com. That's the number one. Openchairpodcast1 at. So until next time, stay honest, stay curious. The chair's open. I'll see you guys on the next one. Later.